Hi everyone, my name is Isaac Litzit and I'm the student delegate representing Australia and New Zealand for the World Federation of Music Therapy. As part of our global classroom project, I have the absolute privilege of interviewing Professor Katrina McFerrin from the University of Melbourne in Australia. Professor McFerrin is an internationally renowned clinician, researcher, academic, author and editor with extensive research output in the field of music and adolescence. Thanks for coming on today. How are you going?
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. So I thought today we could have a chat about clinical and academic experiences so everyone can get a bit of a snapshot of music therapy in Australia. My
Mm.
first question today is, what type of clinical experiences do students get while they're at university? And I suppose that also ties into which contexts are music therapists often found in Australia.
Great question. Well, I've been thinking a lot about the word clinical practice. I know it's very common around the world that
Mm.
this is how we refer to our practice, but I often think that that particular term clinical, it's so closely related to private practice or
Mhm.
perhaps mental health care. But when we're working in other contexts, like hospitals, for example, the doctors are the ones who think of themselves as the clinicians, and they can get quite confused when we go around calling ourselves clinicians as well. So it's such a contextually sensitive word, but certainly the placement experiences that our students have, our commitment to the Australian Music Therapy Association, which is our regulating body, is that you would have at least three, if not four, contrasting experiences. And we interpret contrasting to mean you might work with children and adults, and you might work across medical, educational, community contexts. And therefore, we would look at anything from early intervention with kids with disabilities and families, through special education and sometimes even some mainstream education. I'm working through the age range here, pediatrics in hospitals, so children's hospitals, a little bit of adolescent mental health,
Mhm.
and then as we work into working with adults, more adult mental health, adult health contexts, some community-based services for people who are struggling with substance use issues, and then into elder care, working in aged care facilities, whether they're more community oriented or more institutional. So we try to get you all to have a range of experiences rather than just come in and specialize or just have one long placement where you become expert. Our program is really focused on being what we call eclectic and training you to be able to work in a range of different contexts.
So it's kind of like we get to experience as many things as we can, and then sort of we have the knowledge ourselves to sort of specialize where we sort of want to. And yeah, it's really
Exactly.
great, really great.
Yeah.
So yeah, are there any sort of cultural related skills which students are like expected to learn before practicing or working as a professional music therapist?
Yeah, well, Australia is a really diverse country in terms of people coming from a lot of different backgrounds. We have a tragic and horrendous history of colonising this particular island and treating our Indigenous people with a complete lack of respect. Actually, the number of Indigenous people in Australia is appallingly low. And so they're not one of the major groups of people that we might be lucky enough to work with. But in terms of people coming from other cultures, certainly if you go to any hospital or to any aged care facility or to any school, you wouldn't just be working with people from a single culture. So, in a sense, all of our training is about working with people to try and understand their unique needs, some of which are related to culture, and some of which are related to their illness, and some of which are related to their musical talents and abilities. So we don't sort of specialize in one particular culture and knowing the repertoires of a particular culture, because in our country that would just be impossible, you know. But we certainly try to make it clear that that's an important part of people's lives that we should take account of and listen for interest in when we work with anyone.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Um, yeah, so are there any sort of cutting edge sort of ideas or sort of practices in Australia at the moment? I'll use the word again, like clinically or
Mm.
from a research perspective. And yeah, how are they sort of adopted in education in Australia?
Yeah, well, we're lucky enough. The University of Melbourne program is a research university. And so our staff are expected to be constantly undertaking research and also training PhD researchers. And it's my view that the most exciting research tends to come from PhD researchers because they bring the latest thinking, they do the most thorough work, they spend 3 years focusing on one topic. And so, and you know, they actually have to be groundbreaking in order to get their PhD. So at the moment, we have a group of 20 PhDs across the creative arts therapies, but mostly in music therapy. And so we're constantly asking them to feed into our teaching, even as they're still going. And we have strong networks with researchers around the world. So we're always trying to bring through whatever the latest trends are. At the moment, you know, we've been lucky enough to receive a lot of funding in the dementia care area, and we've been particularly interested in exploring family-based care models and not just direct treatment models in some institutions. So that's a big part of what we're bringing in. My own research is with adolescents and thinking about healthy and unhealthy uses, and every one of our team would like to think that they've made some kind of an interesting breakthrough. So I would say that it's multiple and various, the different influences that are coming through at the moment. Critical thinking, I guess, is unavoidable in our cultures around the world at the moment. I would hope, especially with the Black Lives Movement. So I think that critical thinking has been the most recent theoretical framework to be really strengthened in our program.
Thank you. That's, yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. And yeah, this is the last question. Are there any sort of instruments or styles used in music therapy that are particularly unique to the Australian context?
Well, we like to think that songwriting is something which Australians have been particularly prominent in reporting on to the world. So we think of improvisation as being perhaps something that's used around the world a lot. And we certainly know that our colleagues in America and Asia still use a lot of songs and song sharing and singing, and that songwriting has now become very popular in many places. But when we first started talking about it, it wasn't so common to discuss. So really song-based and the use of guitar as a part of that are pretty defining within the Australian music therapy scene.
Yeah, was there ever a time where like guitar wasn't so prominent in Australia, or?
Yes, believe it or not, there definitely was. You know, it was very much about people coming through the classical tradition for many decades and therefore picking up guitar as a second instrument. But when I trained in the early 1990s, we had to learn piano accordion as our portable instrument. So we did a bit of piano accordion and a little bit of guitar. It was considered about equally useful. So yeah, things have changed.
Yeah, I never would have thought about piano accordion, but yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, that's the last of the questions today. And yeah, thank you so much for giving everyone around the world your insights into Australian culture and music therapy. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. Great to talk to you.